Good morning, everyone. A quorum being present, the Subcommittee on National Security and Foreign Affairs hearing entitled, "Is This Any Way to Treat Our Troops?" Part 2 will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that only the Chairman and Ranking Member of the Subcommittee make an opening statement, and without objection is so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the hearing record be kept open for 5 business days so that all members of the Subcommittee be allowed to submit a written statement for the record. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the following written statements be placed on the hearing record. Dr. Alan Glass, a military physician who has worked at Walter Reed for 20 years. Gary Knight, a former patient at Walter Reed. Patrick Hayes, a police officer who has worked at Walter Reed for almost 20 years. Dr. Richard Gardner, who worked at Wind Army Community Hospital for Fort Stewart in Georgia. Specialist Stephen Jones, an Iraqi veteran. And Corporal Steve Schultz and his wife Debbie. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the gentleman from Maryland, Representative Cummings, and the delegate from the District of Columbia, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, members of the full Oversight and Government Reform Committee, be permitted to participate in the hearing. In accordance with our committee practices, they will be recognized after members of the subcommittee. Without objection, so ordered. Good morning, Mr. Chase. Good morning. Nice to see you. We'll proceed to opening statements. I want to just say good morning to everybody here on the panel and all of our witnesses in both panels here today. On March 5th, you recall that this subcommittee convened our first ever hearing on the care of wounded soldiers at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I think it's fair to say that all of us were appalled by the heart-wrenching stories from Staff Sergeant Dan Shannon, Annette McLeod, and Specialist Jeremy Duncan. They spoke of living with mold, being lost in a bureaucratic abyss, and being treated with a shameful lack of respect. But their stories are not, unfortunately, isolated incidents. After our first hearing, we created a special hotline, an e-hotline. We heard from hundreds of people, and the problems went well beyond Walter Reed. A doctor who had come out of retirement to help out at Wynn Army Community Hospital at Fort Stewart, Georgia, said that there they were understaffed, overextended, and, as I quote, much worse than Walter Reed. A soldier who fought in both Gulf Wars spoke of cuts in the Soldier Advocate Program at Darnell Army Medical Center in Fort Hood, Texas, and that traumatic brain injury patients were being or underdiagnosed. Someone at 29 Palms Marine Base witnessed examples of post-traumatic stress disorder going undiagnosed, untreated, and purposely ignored to return soldiers to active duty. She told us that about one Navy psychiatrist who said, and I quote, clearly he did not believe in PTSD. We also unfortunately heard additional trouble stories about Walter Reed. A 20-year police veteran there wrote of cockroaches and mice at their police station. He also wrote, the police station is not handicapped accessible, which is ironic considering we have a large number of handicapped veterans here that may need to come to our station for police services. A Walter Reed JAG lawyer spoke of a broken disability review process that underrates wounded soldiers, a system in which there are only 3 JAG officers and 1 civilian counselor available to represent all wounded soldiers at Walter Reed, a system so overburdened there was no time to get an outside medical opinion or to adequately prepare for the absolutely vital hearings. We also heard in the media about computer programs that can't talk to each other, a growing backlog of VA disability claims, and egregious allegations of still injured soldiers being returned into battle. At our March hearing, with the committee's support, I made the commitment that this subcommittee would perform sustained and aggressive oversight, and as a first step, we would follow up with a hearing in 45 days. Today marks the 43rd day, and I hope we will hear across the board from our witnesses that the Department of Defense acknowledges the seriousness and pervasiveness of these problems, that we are rapidly fixing the broken bureaucracy, knocking down the institutional walls across the services and with the VA administration, and ensuring that each soldier and his or her family is treated with the utmost respect. That's what we hope we can hear. We will hear today from independent review group members, led by the distinguished former Army Secretaries Togo West and Jack Marsh. Their report, released yesterday, examines the problems at Walter Reed and elsewhere and offers a series of recommendations. I want to thank all of the IRG members and staff for your work and welcome those members here with us today. And I know that, I don't know if staff is here or not. At some point you may want to acknowledge them. They certainly did a great job, as did you, and we're really indebted to them and you for your service. As I suspect all these members will likely agree, we've heard many, if not the vast majority, of these findings and recommendations before. From testimony before Congress, from the Government Accountability Office auditors, even from the President's own 2003 task force to improve health care delivery to our nation's veterans. But the problems have not yet been fixed. In February, this subcommittee asked the Defense Department for documents on the problems of Walter Reed. These documents show a rash of complaints about the now infamous Building 18, including mold, mouse droppings, roaches, and flea bites, so severe they required medical attention. There's a slide over there that indicates one of the complaint forms that we witnessed. What's shocking is that these documents don't recount the recent problems that were exposed by the Washington Post in February. What's remarkable is that these complaints happened in the summer of 2005, well before the Post investigation. The documents show that as a result, Building 18 was shut down. And in the words of the Walter Reed Inspector General at that time, Building 18 was not up to standards for occupancy and it has been temporarily evacuated of all personnel. But then Building 18 was reopened. Specialist Jeremy Duncan and others moved in, and it has inexplicably resulted in the same exact things happening again. I hope that we don't do here with respect to the broader problems identified by the IRG group and others is to Building 18 them, simply paint over the problems. We literally and figuratively need to knock down some walls, to roll up our sleeves and to work together to completely overhaul the disability ratings process and to figure out how best to deal with traumatic brain injuries. Put simply, we need to tackle head-on the most difficult problems instead of, once again, simply covering them over with half measures. The fundamental question we all have to ask ourselves now is what is going to be different this time around in order to actually solve these problems. I'm encouraged that the independent review group has assigned specific responsibility to specific officials for specific recommendations, so that 2 years down the road, officials can't just claim that solving a certain problem was somebody else's responsibility. Many of those who will be responsible and accountable going forward will testify in our second panel today. What I want to know is very simple. What's going to be different this time around under your watch to solve the problems once and for all? Be assured that as you continue your work, this committee will be right there with you, offering constructive advice and support where helpful, but also ready to hold people accountable where necessary. Our mutual goal of ensuring the proper care and respect for each patient at each step of the recovery process demands nothing less. The American people don't want to hear any excuses or empty promises. Our nation's soldiers and their families deserve better. These are difficult challenges, and it will take our cooperative efforts, all of us working together, to make sure that this broken system is fixed quickly, and fixed permanently. I recently led a bipartisan congressional delegation to Afghanistan and met with our soldiers there, including some from our Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a young man from Waltham, Massachusetts there. If, God forbid, any one of them gets injured, they deserve to come home to a hero's welcome and to the best care and utmost respect we can give them, not to a building with mold and mouse droppings, not to a maze of impenetrable bureaucracy, and not to a system that works against the very soldiers it should be supporting. That, to me, and I think to the members on this panel, is the job that faces us today.